certainly for those of us in relationships, I think
it puts things into perspective.
Yes, it's a very sobering, thought. Unfortunately, it's human nature to take what we have for granted and not appreciate it fully.
Welcome to Spiritually Hungry. Are you ready for a relationship episode? We haven't done one in a while.
Oh, really? It's been a while.
But relationship is such a big word. Relation to what? What are we talking about? You're going to find out. So we're going to talk about how we change intentionally or by default, how our relationships change, and how to learn to change and grow together instead of solely or independently. And then ultimately that leads to growing apart. That's what I'm planning on talking about. What are you going to talk about?
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic. I think me and you have been talking about this. We talk about this a lot, but also recently, in that you spend a lot of time helping couples. And of course, together we spend time with couples. And I think the reality is that unless there is both individually and collectively a real desire to change and grow together, the likelihood of a relationship coming to where it's supposed to be, which is, a fulfilling and growing, thriving relationship is very unlikely. And I think, maybe touched upon this in previous episodes, but I think it's, we quote Daniel Kahneman, who says that getting married is the most illogical decision people make because the statistics are clear. Marriages don't work. Relationships don't work. They almost always end badly, right? So
I think even the younger generation today, I'm not sure how much of a rush they're even in
it's very
married,
funny, yeah.
Right? And I think that part of it probably, I think there's many variables, but I don't think there's a lot of great role models out there for successful relationships, but especially marriages.
Right.
I want to share a letter from librarian Emily Swan. She writes about her relationship in Modern Love column in the New York Times. And it really struck me. I think it's just the way that she set it up, the way she wrote it, but I'll let our listeners decide for themselves. She said, "My husband and I are going through a difficult time in our marriage, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of advice on how to proceed. We haven't spoken in more than a year. When the children ask where he is, I don't know what to say. I've had to take over all of the household tasks, plus a lot of legal and financial paperwork. I've had a lot of time to reflect on all things I've done wrong, but I can't apologize. The main problem in our relationship is that my husband is no longer alive. Last year at 43, he died of an undiagnosed heart condition. I've done a lot of things to keep his memory alive, especially since we have two small children, one of whom was born after he died, and both of whom will grow up without memories of him. I've made board books with his photo, organized his tools and art supplies, framed posters from concerts we attended, but it's hard to know if what I'm doing is healthy." She continues.
I just found that, again, I think...
shocking, right?
Yes.
Because when you start reading, you're like, oh, that's odd. Why aren't they talking for a year? And
I just assumed that they were having, they were divorced or something.
He moved out or something.
But I think, again, I know you want to go deeper into that, but I just think certainly for those of us in relationships, I think
it puts things into perspective.
Yes, it's a very sobering, thought. Unfortunately, it's human nature to take what we have for granted and not appreciate it fully. Any gift that we have.
Time, especially, I think often I'll work on the relationship when I have time. It's not the priority because I'm already married or I'm in a committed relationship, but I'm going to grow all these other things that need tending. Right. And then we never think we're going to run out of time. And certainly we also never consider the digression of the relationship that is not tended to. She continues, "I used to like reading relationship advice. My husband and I had a good relationship, but it had its quirks. I liked reading about other people's problems and solutions because it reminded me that no one is perfect. But now I'm struck by how irrelevant all the advice is to my current situation. You can't improve sex and communication or equitably divide household tasks with someone who isn't there, or learn the love language of a ghost. I'm aware that I am technically not married anymore. I have checked the widow box on more forms than I can count. But being widowed doesn't feel the same as being single. I feel like I'm still in a relationship, especially because I'm raising our children. I still live in the house we bought with the decisions we made." So I want to hear what you have to say, but her essay resonated with me for many reasons. Of course, my first emotion was sadness. This woman was still in love and wanted to work on her relationship, and she had regrets. She wanted to make apologies, but he wasn't there to hear her anymore. She was holding on with all of her strength, but what she needed to do was let go, which required even more strength. The irony is that in many relationships, people let go because it feels easier in those moments than holding on. Ego is present, but when we lose someone, humility takes its place. I wrote that last night, by the way, because I was reading the article and that I just felt like moved to write about that. But really, that is the irony, right? We're so quick to say, oh, I've outgrown the relationship. I've outgrown the marriage. This isn't working for me anymore. I've lost myself, or I need to find myself, or I need to find someone else. And we get so confused. And I'm really excited to unpack this, because a lot of that really is ego at its best. And when a person passes, right, and we've lost someone we love, the first thing we feel is very small. We feel very humbled into, wow, I can see clearly for the first time.
Right. As I think about it, for me, there's two fundamental awakenings. One is that, the first one, which is that I think we can take it for granted that we are not appreciating any of our important relationships to the degree that we should. And let's hope that we don't have to get to a place where we lose them to gain that appreciation, but rather really, like, for instance, for me, again, as I read this article, obviously I thought about our relationship and how much I appreciate it. And I think for all of our listeners to really take this time to maybe use it as a moment to focus on the power and the beauty of the relationships that you currently have. Sometimes you have to think, well, how sad would you be, or how lost would you be if you didn't have that relationship?
And also to focus, instead of on what's lacking, really focus on the essential points that make or break a relationship, which are first and foremost growth individually, but together, which we're definitely going to unpack. Vulnerability, connection, and being known deeply by our significant other. That doesn't happen automatically at all. And by the way, that's not love alone. This is actually what makes relationships get better with time. It's what makes you feel really like you are home with somebody, that you are really one with somebody. These things that I just mentioned have to be something that is developed and that is strong for a relationship to thrive. Love is never enough.
And I think that is so fundamental, but that most, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because you work with many more couples than I do, but that most people do not, first, maybe understand, second, aren't willing to do the work of change. So you can sit with a couple.
Well, they don't appreciate the importance of it because it's happening anyway.
Well, it's happening, but also the
directed change.
Importance, right? So I'll use this maybe a basic example where you have a couple sitting, and and the husband was sort of upset about she was out with her friends 3 nights a week, right? So you can solve that problem, right? How do you not get angry, or how do you hear her say that she really needed whatever? Solve the problem. But the real problem, the real fundamental problem that exists in almost every single relationship, is that there is necessary change for both of those in the relationship in order to be able to truly have a long-term and thriving relationship. And most people, again, they deal with problems in the moment to solve them, rather than saying, okay, it's important to do that, to solve any current problems. How committed am I to really change? And I have to say that I think that I have very rarely seen that acceptance and commitment to consistent change in order to make the relationship as powerful and beautiful as it can be. And that's why so many relationships end badly.
Well, what I wrote in Rethink Love is, and I wrote it again and again, is that there's no such thing as a stable relationship. And couples are either growing together or they're growing apart. And I think that everybody needs to know that is the reality, to understand that what we're saying, if you want to have a very happy relationship where you feel unconditionally loved and you're able to receive it and give it, you must know that this is the formula, that you have to choose to grow and change together.
And I think that's so important. Before you share from your amazing book, And by the way, again, it's a good time to remind our listeners, if you haven't yet bought or read or shared it with all of your friends and family, pause the podcast right now, go to Amazon.com and order many, many copies of Rethink Love. But the point that you said is so important, that most people don't have the understanding that otherwise it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work unless they're really willing to, to put in the time and the effort and to change. So I would actually challenge our listeners right now, ask yourself, and maybe if you're sharing this later or now with your partner, what are the things that you know you need to work on to make this relationship better? And hopefully your partner also has a list, or maybe if it's one thing or two things that they need to change about themselves, not change about themselves in order to make the relationship better. I bet you, if you stopped 100 couples on the street and asked them and ask them each individually, what is the thing that you're working on to change within yourself in order to become a better partner and therefore make this relationship even better? Most people probably wouldn't even start. Maybe when they go to couples therapy, 7 years into the marriage, when it's not working, they start making lists, right?
Well, but the lists are going to be about what their partner needs to be and how they need to change in order for them to be happy.
Yeah, no,
that's not the list that you're speaking
about. I think again, and I really ask our listeners to take that time. Ask again, if you're listening to this for yourself and you're in a relationship, ask yourself the question: what is it about you that you need to change in order to be a better partner, in order to allow your relationship to become greater? And then hopefully, tonight you're going to see your partner or ask them, or, have this open conversation. What are they changing? And again, I just think...
And I'm not even sure people think they can be happy in a relationship. I think people think like, okay, this is as good as it's going.
Oh, you mean after, but certainly going in.
Going in. If not, why would anybody ever get married?
Yeah,
exactly. I feel amazing. I want to feel like this every single day.
Well, so you're asking something. You're saying that you don't think that many people think, that the relationship can really be amazing and growing and thriving.
Yeah, they think that it's not because they chose the wrong person, or there's somebody better out there, or they've just grown apart. But they never look at like, okay, well, where's my responsibility in that, and can I actually change it? They kind of just accept it as, you outgrow things.
Right. So I think, again, just to underscore, I really think it's a very important question. If you're in a relationship, if it's an amazing relationship, you still have to ask yourself this question. If it's not so great, you definitely have to ask yourself this question. What are we working on independently about ourselves to become a better partner, to enable this relationship to become a thriving and growing, loving relationship?
So when we talk about growth, though, what I think is the key is that you allow your partner to be part of your growth. Because I see this a lot too, right? One person in the relationship, let's say even if it's a spiritual pursuit, or they've become obsessed with tennis or learning the ukulele or whatever it is, and maybe it's learning many things, right? That's just the kind of thing they're interested in growing and expanding, and they do it on their own. And then the partner stays where they're at, and the person that's discovering all these new things about themselves, getting curious about life, enjoying life again in different ways, if they don't either share it with their partner and invite them to explore with them, or the partner doesn't want to, like, oh, I don't want to learn a new language, or I don't want to learn the ukulele, what happens is you start to have many meaningful experiences outside of the relationship. And that's another recipe for disaster. I see it time and time again where that's what happens with couples. They don't actually reach for each other anymore. Or if one offers, the other one rejects their bids for attention and interaction.
Right. But the only caveat that I would add to that is, right, it is important that each individual member in the relationship has not a whole life, but an individual, and things that give them joy that the other partner might not enjoy. But like you said, but in the whole, you have to make sure that if you're pursuing something new, you at least invite them in, and that you don't develop this whole other life outside of the relationship. That's more fun
and interesting. I mean, I think we're a good example of that. I think what's always been the glue for us is that we have the same sense of importance and purpose in life, and the same spiritual relationship with ourselves and the Creator. Like, that is our own individual driving force, and it's what we have together. And I think being married to one another, we've only been able to do more and greater things even in that area. But because we both found it individually, we are our own person, we pursue our own things, We share them though, right? And then we're able to be stronger as a couple for it. So out of everything that I listed, right, the hobbies, the things that you take up, the one thing that I think, and I've written this in my book too, you have to have spirituality in the relationship. So of course you have to have it individually first, but if you don't have that, it's really impossible because ego wins, going the extra mile, forget about it. The understanding of cause and effect, of process, of tikkun, right? It's not even there. So why do the work, right? What is the purpose?
Absolutely. Which is another, I think, again, you said something really important before. I want to underscore that and maybe create in some way as a challenge for our listeners, right? Ask yourself the question, when was the last time you invited your partner in? And again, it doesn't have to be about in everything that you do all the time, but it does have to be consistent. When was the last time you invited your partner in? And when was the last time he or she invited you in? Because
if not, they're not interested in you. I mean, to some level, or they've given up because you haven't responded. And I think I've been really good at this in our relationship, if I can say so myself, is that when I always had a fear, I think because I felt like I was catching up in terms of study and especially with the wisdom of Kabbalah, that I never wanted you to outgrow me in some way, right? Like I always felt like that I really, as inspired as I was when we became married, I wanted to make sure that I always had that fuel for myself. So because I knew if we didn't meet there, that would be an issue. But also even trivial things, like if I start to find interests outside and you're not part of them, and that's why I've influenced you in different ways, right? Like you started using the infrared sauna or like whatever that is, because we're having experiences then together that we both enjoy, right? You were never really a hiker. I mean, I could have all this, but then we do these things together and it makes it fun. And the pursuit of exploring is like a very big part of a relationship. But had you not been open to it, and if I hadn't recognized the importance of that, and you also recognize the importance, then I'm not really sure where we would be, right?
Yeah, beautiful. And again, so I really want to underscore that to our listener. I think it's really an important question to ask. When was the last time you invited your partner in? When was the last time they invited you in? And if it's not often or often enough, make sure you start doing that more. There was something else that I thought was also really important in what you said when you talk about the fact that there has to be a personal spiritual foundation in each individual. Because also something that I've noticed is that a person might, again, if they go to therapy, therapist might say, you really need to work on this, right? But why are you working on it? Are you working on it because, well, my wife's not going to be happy with me if I don't change this about me, so I'm going to do it for her? Or, and this is, I think, where spirituality makes it so much more possible for a relationship to thrive, you really say, actually, I need to do this for me. If I have, for instance, an anger issue, yeah, it also has a negative impact on my relationship, and I better change it so that my relationship can thrive. But actually, I'm not okay because of the spiritual understanding that I need to be growing and becoming a better person with my anger. And that's why the real reason, I'm happy my wife or husband pointed out to me, but the real reason I want to invest the time and effort is not because I want my wife to then, be happier with me, but I want to be happier with me. So when the view in a relationship, the things that need to change, and we all have things, and we're always going to have new things that we need to change and grow in order to make the relationship thrive, it's not, one more thing I got to do for my wife or husband to be happy with me, right? Rather, it's, I'm so happy that I realized I have an anger issue, or I'm so happy that I realized that I'm a little bit lazy. Not because now I'm going to put the effort so that my wife or husband partner is going to be happier with me, but rather because I'll be happier.
But hence, that's why spirituality has to exist individually, because nobody's going to be motivated to do any of those things. Oh, I'm so happy that my wife pointed out my anger issues, or, I get the opportunity to work on that through this relationship. That will not be the reality, right?
Right. But I think, but the point is, and this is why relationships are actually so important and the most vital element of a person's development in life, we'll call it spiritual growth, is because when you're in your own cocoon, you will not, you might be, I know a lot of people, they're okay being lazy, or they're okay being an angry person. But actually, if you look at life as my number one priority in life is to be evolving and growing and changing, then I'm so happy that it happens to be my wife who is helping me realize that anger is not helpful, or that being lazy isn't so great, or that, and so the whole list of things. Actually, the beauty of a relationship is that your partner is helping you discover those things about yourself that you want to change for your own benefit, for your own growth and development.
And they're really your mirror. But I'm curious, what would you say that the thing that has brought us the closest together in the hard times or the good times? Like, what was the...
I think vulnerability through the challenging times.
Yeah.
That would be... Well, would you have a different answer?
No, I would say that's number one, for sure. And it's interesting is if I look at all the years we've spent together, you know, we've created a family, we raised our children. There were many storms we weathered. We laughed, we cried, we grieved, we dreamed. We learned what it means to be a partnership. But if I look back at that whole list, yeah, of course the highs, but it was really the vulnerability through the most difficult times that we leaned in towards each other that really shifted everything.
And I was saying the second thing is the openness to allow each other, I don't know the words to change us, but to help us realize those things about ourselves that we want to change.
Yeah, but I think the first was everything we just said.
It's foundational.
It's interesting because there's a couple that we both know, and I think it's a really good example of what not to do. They got married. He was very clear about how important his spiritual practice was to him. She kind of went along with it, took some interest, learned a little bit, was supportive. What he didn't do, because he knew on some level there was a limit to how much she would be involved or want him to be involved with his practice, that he didn't share that where he was at was not enough for him, and that his intention was to become even more spiritual and really pursue that much more actively than he was when they were together and dating. So what happened is after the marriage, that became a huge point of contention because he wanted more and she thought that he would kind of outgrow it, or it wouldn't be as, or at least it would just stay that way, you know, or maybe wane over time. So he was growing and changing. She wasn't. She was becoming jealous and resentful, and it pulled them apart. They divorced, and I don't see that as a bad thing. The good thing was it was really within a year of their marriage because it became so obvious. It was before they had children, before it was 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. But it's an issue I think a lot of couples face because when people are dating, that's not high on their list, that I want to find somebody who is spiritual, but more than, because spiritual would be like, oh, we can have deep conversations. No, like actively pursuing, you know, growing and changing and making their ego smaller. It's not high on the list, right? So I think that that's part of the issue why these relationships aren't set up that way in the first place.
Right. I think what I'd like to say two things. So this, I often like to see things as they are organized. So there's basically 5, I think you might even have written about this 5 stages in every relationship, right? So, and the different therapists, psychologists give it different names, but these are the 5 basic stages. So there's the infatuation, or sometimes called the honeymoon phase. Then there's the coming together. So both those always sort of almost always, although I've seen people being dragged to marriage or coming together, but okay. I'm sure we've all seen that. So those
we've been to more weddings than most people.
Yes. So infatuation, coming together, right? Relatively straightforward. Those are the places where people think, okay, work over. Then there's what's either called the power struggle or the disillusion phase, right?
The come to Jesus moment.
Well,
what did I?
Yeah,
that's when the euphoria wears off and all those hormones, good feelings are kind of like not at the front. And now you really see the relationship. You see the good and the bad.
Right. And
whereas in the beginning, we overemphasize the positive and de-emphasize the negative. And
so that's where marriages end and relationships end, right? And then so the last 2 stages, right, is the commitment stage, right? So you've been through difficult times, you've been through challenging times, but you say, no, this is actually the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And then the 5th stage, which I think is so beautiful and really worthwhile both to be thinking of, is the co-creation stage, right? Where you realize, okay, we're because we're committed. This is our life together. Together, we're going to create. We create a family. We'll create many, many things together.
I feel like the committed is kind of a recommitment, because
Right.
parts before that
You thought the coming together was a commitment,
yeah,
but it wasn't.
and it's not.
But
it's a re-choosing once you're not feeling all of those great feelings all the time.
And what I think is so important is that if you ask most people, are very much aware of the first two, completely unaware of the last three. And really, it's the last two that are the most powerful, right? It's the commitment and the creation together that is the most beautiful and powerful. But if you don't go through the certainly the third stage, of the struggle and the work that we spoke about, then you can never get to the commitment. You'll never get to the co-creation stage. I just think it's so
ridiculous
that most people only think about, if you ask people about relationships, whether they're conscious or subconscious, it's the first two. There's the infatuation and there's the coming together. End of story. And then why doesn't it work? I don't know. I guess, it's rather than saying, no, actually relationships is at least, right? A 5-stage process. So you accept there's going to be an infatuation. So if you're not in a relationship now, know that you're going to go through hopefully go through 5 stages. If you're in a relationship now, even if you're in the infatuation stage, or you're getting towards, or you're in the coming together stage, beautiful, amazing. But realize that the real work and the real power and the real beauty of a relationship is in the struggle, is in the commitment, then is in the co-creation stage. And unless you have your eyes open towards that, and this goes back to why it's so important to have, I would say, a spiritual, or at least I'll call it simply a desire to change and grow. There's no way to get to stage 3 and into stage 4 and 5 unless you're growing and changing and desiring to grow and change.
Well, it's interesting because this is really about self-discovery, but self-discovery together, right? It's about now you've discovered that your relationship's not what you thought it was, that marriage wasn't what you thought it would be, and then you have a choice to make, and then you need to bring your partner in with you. There was a recent study published in the Journal of Memory and Cognition, and researchers, I thought this was really interesting, because I think it really proves this point. Researchers wanted to understand the way we think about events in our past, things that make up our perception of our life. So they asked participants ranging in age from 8 to 81 to recount 7 key memories that represented their life story, which I think is funny because some of them haven't experienced their whole life yet. I mean, 8, but I guess they wanted to see the range. Then they had them note how significant each was in making them who they are today. Researchers then documented each memory falling into one of 3 categories. 1 was happy, 2 was unhappy, and 3 was neutral. So what they found was really interesting. The happiest memories of all tended to occur in what age?
I think you should.
I know I did. But what do you remember the answer you thought?
I thought it was in the 40s and 50s.
You thought it was 40 because that's your age. You're adorable. No, you always, because you're a happy guy. That's great. But it was the 20s that was the happiest times of their lives, no matter how old they were. So why? In a word, self-discovery. Because if you think about it, your 20s are when you leave home, you go to school, you learn a new trade, you start to live life on your own terms and based on your own choices. It's a time of discovery and the decade when we learn the most about ourselves. And what they wrote in the article is the major transitions that typically occur during this time are likely to be especially memorable and self-defining. The heady process of figuring out who we are, as young adults often do, could cast a warm glow on those memories for decades to come. And the point is, and this is why the article struck me, is that if you're doing life correctly, you should have self-discovery in every single decade.
That is such an important point.
And I was like, of course, then you're going to always look back because that was the time you allowed yourself to go and to discover and to be, and you had that emotional intelligence with yourself and those deep conversations with yourself, and then with hopefully your partner too.
And people make the huge mistake of thinking whether choose an age, 30, 40, 50, 60.
I can't do that. I don't have the luxury.
Not just that I don't have the luxury.
They have the time.
This is who I am. Right? So this is who I am. And maybe I'll get a little bit smarter. Maybe I'll, and it's funny. I was actually studying about this week. There's a biblical portion when it talks about the life of Sarah. And it says something very interesting when she dies. It says she was 100, she was 20, she was 7. Basically, you take all those together. She died at age 127. But the sages asked the question, why
say it like that?
Why does it 100 and 20 and 7. And they say because when she was 100 years old, she was, as it says, as if she was 20. What does that mean? Exactly to your point. Even when she was 100 years old, she knew she still needed to be changing and delving deeper.
Is that really what you read? That's that's so serendipitous that I found this in this Memory and Cognition magazine.
Yeah, and that's the point. The point is, I think this is true, and this is a big problem in relationships, but it's a problem in life.
And what does it mean then she was 7?
7, it means that, well, it talks about beauty, that she was as beautiful as a young person, even into her later stages. But I think that thought that, you become who you are when you're in your 20s, and then you basically are that person into your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s until you leave this world is such a, like, I know, even though, I just turned 50, I my desire and my hope is that in the next 10 years, I become completely different. I don't know in what ways, but I certainly don't look back at my 20s and say, oh, that I became who I am, who I will be in my 20s. But it all goes back to the desire to change. And this is the power of a relationship. And this is the power of simple happiness in life.
Now, with that said, I can appreciate, because then I thought back, I asked myself the question, right? Is there like a time where I feel I look back more fondly on, and my goal is the same as yours in the sense that I want to enjoy each stage of my life. But with that said, the first time I became a mother, right? It's more about moments, right? Or when we had many small kids running around the house and there's certain aspects that tug at my heartstrings, but I don't look back at them and then you're not meant to, right? So I just want to be clear about that. There will be times you'll go back to memories that really stand out as powerful, but not to look back, because we see this a lot with much older people. The best time of my life was, and they live that decade over and over again in their head, and they're not really living presently.
Right. And I think the point is, and again, this is really, I think, a deep point, but hopefully, our listeners get, even though we've only spoken about it for a little bit of time, but that most people see themselves as being who they are, again, molded at 20 or 30, whatever. And then the rest of life is being that person in different situations. No, that's certainly not the way we live our lives.
But we're not meant to live like that.
Exactly. That you want to be deeply changing. That'll be the best for your relationship. That'll be best for your own personal happiness. And I think I do think it's a fundamentally different way of looking at life and one's development than most people do.
And I think that there are certain cultures that do this better. They understand that you can only get a certain amount of wisdom at this age, or this other thing happens at this age, right? Many different cultures embrace menopause because now you're at that age where, instead of giving out that energy of life to something else, you're now bringing that energy of life within. I mean, there's many different, and I think that we should really look at how do we think about aging? How do we think about the different years of our life? Do you believe that you should retire at a certain age? And then what are you going to do? Find a new passion, right? Like, it's to really look at your life, the totality of it. And I love the example you gave of Sarah, because, what is it at 100, right? What is it at every kind of stage? And even things that happened to us that weren't great, don't let that tarnish either. But I want to flip this the other way now, because I also know couples who are very much into self-discovery, and they do it often together, but sometimes separately, ayahuasca journeys, different kinds of things. And they're having, talks with Jesus, and they walked with Noah, and they're having these moments where they don't think their partner can understand it, or they don't feel comfortable sharing it. So they're having these real emotional responses to an experience, but they're having it alone, and they don't feel that they can share it with their partner. So it's creating separation, and they're finding new places to be excited about, but not necessarily ever bringing their partner in on that. And we touched on that at the beginning, but I think as we wrap this up, it's so important to make sure that those aha moments that we have, those times where we have an extreme emotional response to somebody, make sure that you bring your partner along on that journey. Because sometimes our deepest conversations are not with the people we've chosen to spend our lives with, which eventually leads us to choosing something else.
Absolutely. Which reminds me, there's an article years ago in the New York Times, and there's just two sentences here, which I think is exactly to the point that we're talking about. We don't marry one person as much as we marry one version of a person.
Oh, I love
a
that.
snapshot
Well said.
of who we and our partner are individually and to one another at the moment when we say I do.
Where'd you find that?
It's an article from the New York Times years ago. Who we are 5, 10, or 40 years later is anybody's guess. People change. As a result, relationships change too.
I love that. I love that. I can't say that better. It's funny. I was talking to you this week after I worked out. I called you because I was having some feelings. And I started telling you a bunch of dark thoughts that I had after my sweat. And just saying it to you, like then I was over it. I felt better. I already had gotten over it, and it wasn't even serious. It's just sometimes my mind will go to different places for different reasons. And then I said to you, if you remember, I was like, I love that. I said, you're the only person that knows every side of me, like the dark, the scary, the vulnerable,
Not so dark. It's not so scary.
I think it is. Is it not? I remember once
really.
I had this thought over and over again. Then you started to think the thought yourself, but that never usually happens. But I really appreciated that us in that moment, and just to be able to show you all of my snapshots.
So if you leave our listeners with one thought or...
Well, I'm going to take a page from your book and I'm going to repeat myself.
Good.
There's no such thing
Are
as
you saying that I'm repetitive?
No, but you're very good at making a point and then saying, yeah.
Because I think if you're sharing
I think it's so important.
Yeah.
I never do that. And I should do it more. I probably wouldn't do it as much as you do.
I think there's a quote, I don't know if it's where it's from, like they say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
That's great. And
Yeah.
I just feel like, oh my God, I need to give more and more and more. I always give too much information.
Because again,
I know
hope
they
our
heard
listeners
it,
know,
then they go somewhere else in their mind, they come back again.
The purpose of this podcast is not just either to entertain or to give interesting information. Hopefully this is a part of people's internal journey of transformation. So for that, you really need to pay attention to things. You have to hear it certainly more than once in order to make it a part of your change.
So to take a page out of your book, there is no such thing as a stable relationship. Couples either grow together or they grow apart.
Beautiful. And I'd like to end actually with the end of that article that you shared in the beginning of where she, of course, is writing this after having lost her husband. At the end, she writes this: in case it isn't obvious, this essay is one of my attempts to both reach out to my husband and let him go. I feel like words read by people I have never met in places I have never been will have some special power. They will travel to places I cannot go, and maybe that means a part of me can go with them to wherever my husband is, if he is. Maybe this was never about giving or receiving advice. It was just about expressing my love. It doesn't make sense, but it's not any weirder than lighting candles or visiting mediums, right? If so, there's obviously only one thing I want to say. Hey, baby, I love you.
Mm-hmm. That's so sad.
Sad and beautiful, and hopefully awakens for all of us and our listeners both an appreciation and desire to push to change so that our relationships can continue to thrive and be as powerful as they're meant to be. Mm. So I'd like to take an opportunity to share with our listeners an email from one of our listeners. And this is from Ginger. Dear Monica and Michael, I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time now, and I want to thank you for the wisdom you both share with the world. I stumbled across your podcast while I was in a dark period of my life, and you have given me beautiful thoughts and tools to start living my life in a way that feels authentic to who my soul is and truly living. I recently lost my mom to suicide, and it's been truly devastating. But something happened the day after that has been a grounding anchor for me through this sea of grief. I was sitting on a high deck with my friend, starting for the first time to feel anger for what had happened, when my friend pointed out a small white feather floating gently upwards towards us. There was no breeze. This feather had no business drifting the way it was, yet there it was. And in the minute that we watched the feather drifting, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. And I knew that, however hard this may be for me going forward, my mom is now safe and at peace. I don't know if I would have been open and able to see this sign if I hadn't been guided by your wisdom these past couple of years. Thank you both again for sharing your light. It truly makes a difference. With care, Ginger.
That's so beautiful, and I'm so sorry.
Yes. And thank you, Ginger, for sharing this with us and with our listeners. And as I say, this is why we do what we do. And it really inspires us. And I'm sure it does inspire our listeners. The fact that this wisdom, that what we share in some ways makes lives better, helps change and growth and different perspectives, continues to inspire us. So this is, I think, the perfect time to remind our listeners again, share this podcast with everybody you know. Go to Apple Podcasts and write 5-star reviews. Make sure to send us your thoughts, comments, inspiration, stories to Monica and Michael at spirituallyhungry.life. Monica and Michael at spirituallyhungry.life. And as always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it.
Stay spiritually hungry.